Womendeavour respectfully acknowledge the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung people of the East Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians on the land on which we work and live. We would like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, lovely Womendeavour family. We're very excited today to be here discussing women living with HIV in the workplace with Heather Ellis. Heather is an absolute superstar in this field. She is the current Communications and Engagement Coordinator for Positive Women Victoria and has also been a former chair and board director for this organisation. She's also a published author who has shared her own HIV journey in her books Ubuntu and Timeless on the Silk Road, which follow her solo motorcycle journey through Africa and Central Asia, where she nearly died of AIDS a year before the discovery of effective HIV treatments. Heather is also a mother of 3 teenage boys, an aspiring screenwriter, and host of the Our Stories Ending HIV Stigma podcast. Her lived experience makes Heather a passionate advocate for ending the shame and stigma around HIV diagnosis, and we are so pleased to have her here today. That is just one very impressive bio. Heather, thank you so much for joining.
Hi, Grace. Thank you so much for having me.
Did you want to talk a bit about your background here and how it sort of links to your books?
It all probably started when I was working at a uranium mine in the Northern Territory. I was a radiation safety technician, and I'd finished year 12 and basically went to work in this mine because my parents were working there. And as you know, from the mining industry, you make pretty good money and you get into the life there. And it was on the fringe of Kakadu National Park, which was a beautiful place, part of the world to live. And I ended up being there for like a good part of my 20s. I had a 2-year hiatus where I went backpacking to Europe and came back and basically got my old job back at the mine, and it felt like I'd never left. So I was really sort of watching my whole entire youth kind of flash by, and I was desperate to get out and live life. And then I just got this idea to ride a motorcycle across Africa, and then that went on to being across Europe and Central Asia on the Silk Road, down through China, back to Australia. Got home, and I was actually diagnosed with HIV when I was in London, which was after I'd travelled through Africa. That came about because I wanted to study Russian at the Moscow University for 3 months, so I could learn Russian before my journey through Central Asia and Siberia and so on. But that 3-month visa required a HIV test. So I went, had the test, and it came back positive. So that was in September 1995, as you're saying in your introduction, before the discovery of the effective HIV treatments that we have today, which basically, in a way, are as good as a cure. Like, I'm very healthy, and they have this thing called U equals U, which is undetectable equals untransmittable. So the virus is so suppressed and at such low levels, you cannot transmit it to other people through sexual contact. That was like a devastating thing for me to happen. It was like the end of my entire life. And, the doctor said, you've got 5 years to live. And I thought, well, I'll continue going traveling, which is what I did. But what happened is when I got to Hanoi in Vietnam, I was very sick because while I was traveling for that year, which was over sort of end of 96 to September 97, I didn't have access to the internet. I couldn't sort of find out about the discovery of these new treatments. So when I got back to Australia, I was put into hospital and, given the treatments, got well again. And from there, I then went on to university and studied journalism because I wanted to be a writer. I knew then I wanted to write my story. And I was advised I was actually going to do an English literature degree. And they said to me, well, you probably won't get a job with that. So why don't you do journalism? So I did journalism and absolutely loved it. And, graduated, worked for News Limited. And the whole writing of my creative writing of my journey through Africa and the Silk Road was kind of put aside And it wasn't until nearly 20 years after that journey that I wrote the two books that you mentioned, Ubuntu and Timeless on the Silk Road. But about the same time I graduated from university, I moved to Melbourne. And that's where I became involved with Positive Women Victoria and became a member. They're a support and advocacy group for women living with HIV. And, you know, when you're living with HIV, you feel very isolated, and you've got this secret. Well, I did at that time. It wasn't until my books were published and I kind of completely came out with my HIV status but prior to that, you know, you live in secrecy. And that was also the case with work as well. Like when I was working for News Limited, you know, my biggest fear was, oh my God, if they found out, you know, that would be the end of my career. You know, I'd be kind of sidelined and I wouldn't have the same opportunities as I would as other people. Because at that time as well, I was wanting to be a foreign correspondent. You know, that was kind of my sort of dream, sort of to be, you know, sort of reporting around the world. But I ended up getting married and then having children. So that was the end of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an incredible, diverse career and experiences. And I think the Womendeavour audience will really appreciate that feeling of being lost and you sort of just doing something, but you know it's not 100% where you want to be. But it's really inspiring to hear that you will find your way if you sort of listen to yourself and keep working at it. Wonderful things can come.
I think like one of the biggest things with me is when I started traveling because I was traveling on my own. So you become really in tune to your intuition and you become really in tune to all these chance encounters and coincidences which come along. And I mean, that's why I wrote the first book, because I felt I had to share this with the world. This was like an amazing story, and the things that happened to me, I just had to, you know, I just had to get it out there. And I live my life that way now, that you know, like you might not be where you want to be, but it's all part of your journey, and things will come along to guide you along the way. And as long as you kind of keep the vision of where you want to go, if you keep that in your mind and at the front of your mind, you will get there. Like it will happen. I mean, you do have to put the work in, but as long as you don't drift into, you know, digress into some other area or give up the hope that things will work out for you, because the journey is part of where you're going. It's part of the destination. You know, the destination is not the most important thing. It's that journey of getting there. And when you're on that journey, everything you're doing is building your experiences, building your kind of repertoire of who you are and what you've got to offer the world.
I think that's so inspiring, especially in a time of COVID where things probably aren't going the way any of us anticipated, but sort of embracing the experience, but keeping your direction and trying to stay true to yourself is really important. I might just clarify, in case anyone in our audience doesn't know, what is HIV and how many women does that affect in Victoria?
It's a virus that affects your immune system. So it attaches itself to the immune cells in your body, and it makes copies of itself. So it uses your immune cells as a factory, and that therefore it actually kills the immune cells. And your immune system is what keeps you healthy, keeps you from getting really sick. I mean, with somebody who's got HIV and is not on treatments, the virus can run rampant through your immune system. And your immune system is like, you know, in areas like your gut, it's like 60% of your immune system. So therefore, that's why people start losing weight. They also can't fight off infections like pneumonia, which and a pneumonia called PCP, which is just there, but because when you're healthy, you can fight it off and you don't get sick. And there's like new different kinds of cancers and things like that as well, which will start attacking you because you don't have that immune system. So the treatments that we have now, like it's like they call it a combination antiretroviral therapy. So it's usually a combination of 2 or 3 medications, and these days they have things like it's an injectable treatment. So people might have the injectable every 2 months. So it's not like they've got to take a handful of pills like they used to in the old days. Most people are taking 1 pill a day. So it's not such a big impact on people's lives. And with the injectables, they're sort of looking at them to be like a 6-monthly injection. So it's not like a deliberating disease that affects your life in a terrible way. People live long, happy, healthy, productive lives with HIV, and they're not infectious because of the medications controlling the virus. With the number of people with HIV, there's probably about 1,000 women in Victoria living with HIV. There's probably about maybe 300 a year diagnosed. At the moment, it's probably about 1,000 people in total. I haven't kind of thought about these figures for a long time, but yeah, that's generally it. The big probably issue at the moment with the people who are diagnosed in the heterosexual community, this is men and women, is late stage diagnosis. Because they may have had unprotected sex at some stage, and they've just put it behind them, haven't really thought about it, and they may then after a number of years start to get sick and not know what's going on. So they'll go to their doctor, and also because GPs may not think of that person as sort of being in a risk group of having HIV, and then they're not tested until like the last minute. Like they do all the other tests and then they think, oh, maybe HIV. And this is why it's really important for people, if they have had casual unprotected sex, to go and have a sexual health checkup. And when they go and have a sexual health checkup, they will test for all the different STIs. Chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, HIV as well.
Yeah. And I guess that's a part of the sort of stigma is we have in our mind who we think is somebody who's going to get HIV, and women certainly don't normally fall into that category of what people imagine.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, HIV doesn't discriminate. It affects everyone. And it's a global virus. So, at the moment, the infection rates are dropping because one, people aren't being having tests as much because we're in lockdown, and then the other is people aren't travelling as much. And also, like I travelled to Africa. I contracted HIV through unprotected sex in Africa. It was at a time when I knew HIV was there. So I thought, well, I'm not going to have sex in Africa. I'm not going to take condoms. Why do I need to take condoms? I'm not going to have sex. But one thing people forget about, particularly when they're young, I suppose at all ages, it doesn't matter what age you are, we all have sex, is we do have sex. Sex happens. You meet someone, you might have a few drinks, and one thing leads to another. And then when in the heat of the moment, if either partner doesn't have a condom at hand, you're still going to have sex. That's just normal. It's normal. It's normal what happens. But these days, when people go travelling, you can have a thing called PrEP. So it's a pre-exposure prophylactic. So you can have a 6-month injection. So these are subcutaneous injections that people can have. And that will protect them from HIV when they go travelling. So if they go travelling and they don't take condoms, or they should take condoms if they're going to have sex, because there's lots of other STIs out there that are running quite rampant, like chlamydia. Well, anyway, with PrEP, that will protect them from HIV if they get themselves into a situation where they don't have condoms and and they end up having sex.
It's incredible what the treatments are that are out there and how much diversity there is in the treatments. I think it's incredible, but this diagnosis still affects people in their sort of day-to-day lives, absolutely. How does it affect women in the workplace?
The big thing with HIV is stigma. So it's stigma that's affecting people, not the virus. The virus can be controlled. I mean, you're as healthy as the next person, not infectious. But the stigma is so still strong. And for somebody who's nearly diagnosed, nothing's really changed from when I was diagnosed. They still think, oh my God, I'm going to die. Because up until that point when a woman is diagnosed with HIV, she probably hasn't even thought about HIV and knows nothing about the new treatments and so forth that we have today. In the workplace, it's the stigma that affects people. It's like, I can't let people find out. In my own situation, like I said before, like when I started working for News Limited, my biggest fear was my employer would find out, because I was fearful that I would then get the sack. From News Limited, I then went and worked for an international NGO as their media officer. And this organisation had HIV projects in Africa and Southeast Asia. So I thought, they would understand. But when I started working there, like I made sure I always used my own coffee cup, because I knew at some point people would know. Like I thought, it's actually it's a benefit that they know that I'm HIV, because then all this knowledge I can like share in my writing and in my ideas and opinions about their HIV project. So I thought this was beneficial, but I really made sure that, I sort of had all those measures in place about the coffee cup, because I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable. Because of the ignorance, like you can't catch HIV from a coffee cup, but it's like they don't know that until they've actually had that education, until they've had, their ignorance kind of broken. But with this organisation, when I told my manager, the upper management then had a risk management meeting about what risk I was to my fellow employees, which really shocked me when they told me. I thought, what? That's just so stupid, So, but yeah, once everyone knew and they all understood everything, they were fine. But I'm sure there was some people mentioned, is it okay? Is it safe? Yeah. Another time I worked in hospitality on the weekends for a little bit in a winery, and I never told them that I had HIV. It was like I never mentioned anything about my books. I never shared any of that knowledge, because it's hospitality, and you could cut yourself. You're working with glass could break. You're working with knives. And so, yeah, I didn't tell them at all. And I thought, well, they're not, no one's interested in their fellow employees working on the weekend. They probably didn't even know my last name. So, but yeah, it is difficult in a workplace. And I think there should be a lot more, education to break down that ignorance. Because generally in society, in your general day-to-day life, going about your business, you don't hear anything about HIV, you don't see anything. So yeah, when you do hear about it, the first thing you think is, it's a death sentence, because that's the information people have had from the past.
So it sounds like for people and women living with HIV, it's just added stress in your day, that you're sort of monitoring what you're doing and who knows, and it affects how you act and behave, and that would be quite tiring.
For 99% of women living with HIV, that would be their reality. And it's even more so in women in the migrant community. Say they live in an African community, and all their friends are from the African community, their church. They live with a lot of fear of people finding out, and it's really hard for those women to connect with support groups like Positive Women Victoria and attend an event, because their community is so small that they're fearful that they come to an event and another woman from their community with HIV could be at that event, and then somebody in their community knows, and they could tell someone. It's so, yeah, there's a lot of fear about being their status being disclosed to other people.
Which I imagine makes it harder too when you're trying to create peer networking events and advertising on social media and get people connected to a community, especially if it is quite a small community, trying to reach everyone and bring them together, but also maintain that privacy and confidentiality must be a difficult balance.
Yeah. They, it's a part of their world they don't want to share. So, and that was a world I lived in for many years. I mean, I only sort of really came out publicly about my HIV status and started doing a lot of talks when my books were published. And Ubuntu was published in 2016. So from that point on, because I really felt like I couldn't write the book and not include at the end about my HIV status, because it would be like perpetuating stigma. Be like living a lie. Like, a memoir is it's very personal writing. You need to be honest with the reader. So I thought, well, if I'm not going to share that information, then what's the point of writing it? And I only wrote the second book, Timeless on the Silk Road, because after people knew that I had HIV, they wanted to know what happened next. I had readers write to me saying, well, when's the second book? And I thought, I didn't really think about writing a second book, or better hurry up and get it out. So that book was published in 2019. And I've done so many author talks. And then the books are really appeal to motorcyclists. And I still ride motorcycles. And the motorcycle world, it's kind of a hero world. HIV doesn't sit well in a hero world. And I was really quite nervous because I used to speak to a lot of motorcycle clubs until COVID lockdowns. And I was always nervous, thinking, what are these guys going to think of me? But it was no problem at all. And they all bought my books and they all asked lots of questions. And so, which made me sort of think, in a way, like, we've all got our problems, we've all got our secrets in the background. And I think when they hear someone share their secret, it just makes them feel more comfortable that, we're kind of all in this together. So, and Ubuntu, title of my first book, means, we are all connected. It's like I am because we are. We're in this together. We live as a society together and we're all connected.
I feel like that would be such a lovely vision as well for the workplace, having a space where you are safe to share any health concerns that you're going through, and even beyond health, family, caring. There's so many stresses that we have, simultaneous to work, and the more that we can share that with our fellow teammates and they can support us, and then in turn when they're in a time of stress, then we support them. I think it's a great place that we could be in.
Yeah, because, we spend a lot of time in our workplace, like not now because we're working from home, but in a normal world, we're like 9 to 5, where I know when I worked for the NGO, I was like there all the time, and it was, that becomes your like second family. And I actually like, because I worked there for 6 years, and I think for the first 2 years I didn't tell anyone, and then I thought, I can't go on like this anymore. But when I did tell them that I was living with HIV, it was a sense of relief. It was a huge sense of relief, because, and even when my first book came out in 2016 and I sort of told the world, because prior to that it was like with my children going to school, like does any of the parents know? Because some of my friends know, and I thought maybe they'd mention to somebody, because when you tell someone you're living with HIV, you can't untell them, and it's a really juicy piece of gossip, so it's really hard for people to keep that a secret. So I was constantly thinking, do they know? But it's such a relief, I think, when we can be more open. It takes a lot of stress off your shoulders, and I think it builds a lot of like understanding of each other. So when we're all going through something, and we shouldn't have to go through it alone, to know that we do have support from each other.
Yeah, building those skills to have those difficult conversations for workplaces, I think, is so vital to have a more productive and happy work environment, definitely. You mentioned women coming from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds as potentially having more stigma and discrimination based on their HIV status. Are there any other community groups that you think also have sort of amplified experiences of that stigma?
Yeah, well, I suppose the LGBTQI communities, the queer women and non-binary women, I mean, they've got that added stigma of their gender, right, as well as HIV. So, but it's great to see the level of understanding we have in society now. I think it's fantastic that through the media we have like a higher level of exposure to the different gender diversities and the normality of that in our society. And I can see, HIV would be the same. And like mental health is, when we talk about these issues more, then it normalizes it. Years ago, mental health was such a stigma and nobody would mention it. No one spoke about it. But now we've got, celebrities, football players, they're all talking about, at times they have mental health issues, and which makes it normal. It's a normal human behaviour. It's a normal human condition that we all go through. Like, we're not all perfect and all the time. So, yeah, I just think the more HIV is spoken about, and one of the things I really want to always pushing for is to have like a national anti-HIV stigma campaign where it's, little ads are run through social media where people learn about it, particularly say on online dating sites. So when people are, going through the online dating sites and they see a little ad about HIV, and they might just click on it and learn about HIV, so they're not thinking, if there's somebody on online dating and they say to them when they meet them, look, I'm living with HIV, and that other person just runs a mile. Because a big issue for people living with HIV, particularly in the heterosexual community, is finding a partner, having a relationship, because of that lack of ignorance. Like, the other partner at first might be very scared because they just think, gee, I'm not going to go there. But it can help kind of smooth the way if there's a little bit more advertising or sort of ads to educate people about HIV and the treatments that we've got now, and also to have something in the workplace. Well,
with so many people sort of meeting their partners in the workplace too, I can imagine you're starting to see someone in your workplace and you're thinking, well, when is the point that I disclose, and does this mean it's going to go through the whole environment? It comes back to that stress, I can imagine.
And what if they just meet and go out a few times and then think, this is going to go a bit further, when do I tell them? And they tell them, and then the other person runs away, but they can't untell them. They can't take back that information. So then they have the added stress. What are they going to do? Who are they going to tell? Who are they going to share, that information with? And then another person knows, and who are they going to share that information with? I mean, it's really, really stressful. And that is the world for many, many heterosexual people living with HIV.
Are there any industries that you think are particularly supportive of women living with HIV?
Well, I like to say all of them. I really don't think it kind of goes down well because of the lack of education in hospitality. If you work in a kitchen where there's real serious risks of cutting yourself. I suppose every other industry, there's should be no problem at all. I suppose like industries that work in the HIV sector. I mean, it's a big area. HIV, the healthcare area, the HIV organisations that support and advocate for people living with HIV, the NGO sector working for a non-government organisation like who I was working for, a community development organisation. That's a great field of work to get into. That's a huge employer in Australia, and so many opportunities to work overseas as well, like with AusAid and so forth.
Yeah, it's fantastic to know. It's just about finding your community and doing that passionate work, and hopefully, you'll find the right organisation. Are there any policies and legislation which protects women from discrimination in the workplace if they are living with HIV?
Sometimes I see on a Facebook group I'm with, people say, I'm going to get this job in mining industry or whatever industry, and should I disclose my HIV status? No, they don't. You don't need to, and you won't even be asked. So people do not have to disclose their status, and they will not be. It's illegal to discriminate against them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good to know. How can we make workspaces that are safer and more comfortable for women and non-binary people who are living with HIV?
Education. One of the projects when I was chair of Positive Women Victoria was to have speakers, because I'm also a speaker on the Positive Speakers Bureau, where we go into schools and talk to high school students and so forth. And I thought, well, why not extend that a little bit further and have us talk at workplaces? I know when I worked for this international NGO, we would have people come in occasionally and do a talk, and it was like a team building exercise, just a bit of light relief during our lunch break. And I thought, well, that would be a great idea. We could go in there and do a talk, and it's usually the talks I do is like a female and a gay guy, and I've had such fun times. The talks we've presented have been so entertaining, and we've got the undivided attention of our audience, which could be up to like 150 year 10 students. We don't just talk about HIV, we talk about sexual health in general, and then tell our personal lived experience of living with HIV, which just makes it so much more real than, say, having a school nurse talk to them about sexual health. So I think, we could do that kind of thing, go into workplaces. You could have, a poster in the workplace, so people just see it. And when they see the information, they then think about it, as opposed to remaining completely ignorant. Some of the big hospitality employers, some of the big hotels, Crown Casino, those kind of workplaces where they have a lot of young people, a lot of probably a fairly transient workforce. Again, opportunities for casual sex. So just to have speakers come in, or some sort of information there they see occasionally, I think that would go a long way to break down the stigma and make it a lot easier for people living with HIV in those workplaces.
Yeah, and absolutely. You don't know who's in your workplace and what their lived experience is. So bringing a speaker in, you might actually have somebody in that workplace who really connects and that really speaks to their personal experience and is living with HIV. And I think that would be so lovely for them to feel supported.
And I also think, it would make that other employees just feel a little bit more comfortable in their own skin, depending on what issues they're facing. That they'll just think, well, I'm not alone, I'm going through a hard time because of whatever it happens to be, mental health issue or something else that's happening in their life. And it just makes them feel, other people have got issues as well. I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one here that's sort of going through something. Other people are as well. So it's, I think it makes everyone feel a little bit more, like we're all in this together.
Yeah. Ubuntu.
Yes. Yeah, Ubuntu. Yeah.
Lovely.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Heather, for taking the time to talk with me today. It has been an absolute privilege to hear your story and to share that with our Womendeavour audience as well. I think you've given us some really tangible ways to end discrimination for people living with HIV in the workplace. So I really thank you for that. If people want to find out more about Positive Women Victoria, how can they find you?
Just Google Positive Women Victoria and our website will come up. And if people are interested in my books and reading about my journey, just Google Heather Ellis and my webpage should come up. So I don't think there's that many of us, but yeah, Heather Ellis Books or Heather Ellis Author. Ubuntu was my first book, and then Timeless on the Silk Road.
Thank you so much, Heather. Yep. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.